Walt, another week, I was on the road. This time, I was in Las Vegas. While I was in Las Vegas, I tried to ride in a Zoox, but you're never going to guess how long it took to get one. While the Uber pairing worked with Motional, I moderated a panel between ABB and Waymo, so look for that. And Tesla passed 10 billion miles on FSD supervised. Oops, I'm sorry, folks, it doesn't work, but 10 billion reasons why. What did we learn in the autonomy economy was I was out doing field reports again.
Let's start with Tesla, I guess. 10 billion FSD miles. Some believe that this was going to have this big unlock. All of a sudden, everyone's cars would be able to be contributed into a massive robotaxi fleet. I checked my Tesla. That did not happen. I did get the alert that there was 10 billion miles surpassed, but what I did get was additional software updates, and I haven't really been liking the recent software updates. They feel a bit more cautious, in terms of how they're operating. The navigation is getting better for me. It's still generally a problem, navigation for them. And they have this thing where if you intervene on your FSD, you can actually select the problem with it. So navigation is now one of the things that you can select. So I'm guessing, by the way, that they're going to use this on the next earnings call to say like, hey, on the FSD miles that we had, X percent of them, when you give the reason, we're like dealer's choice, meaning the driver decided they were going to do something, or navigation as opposed to actual safety issues. So, I guess positive news for Tesla. And there was some, I think, additional cars in some of these markets. And I think later you'll talk about what your experience was in Houston. But again, we hit 10 billion and things still haven't really materially changed in terms of what they're doing in the market.
And today, a matter of fact, I noticed the same edge case at two different locations today. When it parked 2 times in a row, it parked in handicap spots. So that's an issue that's going to have to be overcome. So I put in navigation issues both times. Have you run into any of that issues with parking?
I did have that. There's a store that I go to in town that many times it avoided it, but there are other times that it doesn't avoid it. Again, that should be something that a camera can see quite clearly, because these things are marked on the pavement itself. Doesn't seem like that's an edge case, right? That should be basic programming in terms of the parking. So, some work still to be done there for sure.
There's a lot of work to be done there. And speaking of work, I went to Las Vegas this week and I did field work. And I tried to order a Zoox before 11 a.m. And drum roll, please. Walt, what do you think happened?
This shouldn't even be surprising to our listeners. We've talked about this from our experience at CES. We've cited other people's experiences at Zoox. Okay, Grayson, and I know you were tweeting about this. I recommended that you go to Topgolf, have a nice Caesar salad, and while you wait. But how long was your wait, Grayson, for the Zoox?
So I land. You want to call it the gentleman's flight or the Walt flight. I took a very early 6 a.m. flight to Las Vegas. I landed roughly before 10 a.m. And it said, congratulations, welcome to Vegas. And lo and behold, when you walk through the airport, Walt, it was a giant Zoox billboard. So I download the Zoox app, and it says, you're in the service area. I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't work, and I can get airport access? Okay, great. Nope, service does not come online till 11 a.m. I've never heard of it. Let's start with that. Have you ever been in a market to ride in a rideshare vehicle? And yes, to the individuals that tweet me, autonomous, that starts at 11 a.m. Have you ever gotten a notice in the Waymo app that says, Walt, sorry, we're not available until 11 a.m.?
Grayson, I have gotten that, and it's called in the Zoox app in Vegas at CES. That has been the standard for them. That's why when my experience was I ran over to Topgolf, and there was like 6 other people, tech people obviously during CES, who got their cars in 10 minutes, but then obviously given the limited number of cars, it didn't really work for me, and I had to have the 45 minutes. And like I said, I had my Caesar salad because 11 a.m. is a good time for a Caesar salad. But Grayson, let's put that this side, because wait times are addressed with volume, right? So I'm less concerned about that. Why don't you tell me more about the ride itself as opposed to the wait time?
Well, you have to hear the wait time story. So I went to Resorts World, which is a destination. I didn't get a Caesar salad. I was bad. I had a honey glazed donut and a cup of coffee. So I was a little bad. I wasn't healthy. But it was yummy. And so I opened the app at 11 a.m., not available. I refresh 11:05, not available. 11:10, lo and behold, this magic Zoox comes out from the sky and says, okay, grant service. A 67-minute wait, Walt. 67 minutes right when service opened. So what do? I don't want to wait. I had my coffee. I had my donut. And donut was good, by the way. Randy's Donuts, shout out to you. It was really delicious. So I said, okay, well, let's try and see. How many times does it take to play the Uber game to get paired with Emotional? So I first try, I get Emotional. And I go all the way down to the Luxor at the other end of the strip. I said, okay, cool. I said, wait a second. This will be a good commentary. And by the way, field report coming on this. Can I get Emotional to go back in time for the Zoox? Sure enough, paired within 5 minutes, I get Emotional to go back, and I still have 20 minutes to spare. That's what happened.
I mean, you're killing me because you keep saying emotional, and it literally sounds like you're saying I kept getting emotional about riding this car. I guess not a great brand name for that company, honestly. Emotional, like doesn't really work for me. For the 67 minutes, so you said you took multiple rides on this Motional car via the Uber app. That's what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah, or if you want to get really in the weeds, I'm going to channel Brandon from Light Chain. He's like, oh, here he goes. I second that emotion. How's that?
So now that you've gotten this wait time story out of your system, your very emotional wait time story out of your system, can we talk about the ride itself? Because that really means more to me, and I think hopefully our listeners, than the actual wait time for Zoox. Has anything improved since the last time that you've ridden in this thing, or since we were there at CES, which was at the start of the year?
No really major improvement in the ride quality. I do not like the head bar, that netting, because it hits me in a weird location, and I found the seats to act almost like a roller coaster where you're sliding. I found the ride to be more aggressive. No major issues to report outside of the routing to get to me, because you see the routing in the app. It was just going around and around in Rio Circuitos. The ride was just a normal ride, wasn't very comfortable. I didn't like the bench architecture. Felt like I slid more, but no complaints on the ride overall, though.
Okay, so no heavy braking, because in my experience, it was heavy braking. Obviously, at CES, there was a lot of odd things that we're doing. You didn't see that this time, so it sounds like there was some progress that Zoox is making in terms of the ride itself.
It could be, but I want to state this for the record, and to the universe that want to challenge this, go look at the economic data from Las Vegas. Vegas was dead. It was empty. It was a ghost town. And traffic was minimal. To put this in perspective, I was able to go from the Fontainebleau to the racetrack in under 16 minutes. There was no traffic. During CES, it's an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. There was no traffic. Well, I've never seen Vegas like that.
That's fine. But the ride itself, like whether there's traffic or not, the car has to stop. And my experience was heavy braking, like the stuff that we've seen on a lot of these cars in terms of their early. And it sounds like that the ride itself is improving for Zoox.
The ride was improving. It did have issues with speed bumps where it would speed over a speed bump. And so it wasn't picking that up. And then at the Luxor, I spoke to the gentleman that was manning the valet, and he said they get stuck there all the time. Very similar to what we saw at the Venetian, but the ride was improving.
So I'm going to filter through the wait times, the not a lot of traffic, everything else, and focus on the positive here where there's improvement, because I'm actually surprised that Uber pushes this company to the forefront as much as they do. You know, they talk about having 13 different companies that they're going to have, autonomous things. My feeling is that Zoox is a bit behind most, if not many, of them. I'm surprised that they're pushing forward. Maybe they're making progress here. Obviously, I agree with you. If Uber officially launches this and wants to call this a true launch, you can't have 60-minute wait time, guys. I mean, come on. Like, it has to be enough cars to have at least down to, let's say, 15 minutes. That's going to be my kind of my break line on this, to call it something even as you define a launch. And we'll see if they get there. I think they're targeting, Q3 for Zoox to be available. And I guess, again, you're already getting Motional, so Uber's having two cars in one market on the same app. Is that how this is going to work?
That's how it's going to work, is my assumption. And I do want to highlight really quick, I did go to the Zoox Depot, And you want to say I had a Bronx cheer of a reception when I got there, which will be released in a field report. I am under the assumption, based on counting cars, that there are more Highlanders testing than there are Zoox mobiles in Las Vegas, and that there is a supply shortage. That's based on a field report that will be released next week, but just want to put that out there.
I mean, you purpose made this vehicle. We've seen it, in some form for a long time now. It's kind of odd that they would be cranking these things out. You also, I think, I don't want to kind of spoil your video ahead of time, but I think we should call it out. Is you had a lot of security all over you. We know that there's other people that have tried to ride in Zoox in Las Vegas who have been shut down. Someone comes on the speaker and says, "Oh, you shouldn't be videoing this." The Zoox approach to, quote unquote, allow, you can't say that you're allowing riders on there, and then I think effectively try and circle the wagon, or at least attempt to circle the wagon, in terms of information.
Fully agree. Fully agree. There's a level of transparency, in my humble opinion, that's missing, and we do not have any publicly available data. I looked at DMV records. I looked at license plate records, because that is public data for the state of Nevada, and cannot get an actual count to how many Zoox mobiles are on the road. I think as Zoox looks to build trust with the market, with the community, disclosing the amount of vehicles, the Zoox mobiles in the market, I think would be a really good step in starting to build that trust.
The bottom line is this company is going to get more rope than others because of being owned by Amazon, and obviously having the steady potential check of Amazon beyond it. So, but we'll continue to check it and hope they make progress. I don't like the rides there, at least the ones I've had. I do like the vehicle, and I think so. You and I are flip-flopped on that. Let's move on to Motional. First, how did this work in the app? Is it basically like Uber Autonomy in other markets where you had to pick like a category, or did they have a separate Autonomy or Motional choice that you could select to get one?
So you had to call Pat Sajak out and do the great Wheel of Fortune and hope that you get Autonomy. I was choosing Uber Comfort and Uber Comfort Electric. In the first 2 rides, very successful. And then when I tried to get it other times of the day, I had to go 7 rides in a row, unable to get it. So you're rolling the dice if you are going to get paired with it or not. And this is my assumption that it's very similar, that there are certain designated pickup spots where you have a higher opportunity, or perhaps you can only be paired those locations with the Motional Robotaxi.
But just to be clear, first of all, let's back up. Can you just refresh for our viewers who the hell Motional is? Like, where are the cars from? Where did this company come from? What status they're at? And then we'll go on to more about your experience in Las Vegas.
So Motional was started by Carl Inama. And I'm sorry, I probably pronounced Carl. I'm sorry, I probably butchered your last name, sir. I'm very sorry. It was originally known as Autonomy. And Autonomy became on my radar and a lot of individuals' radars in Autonomy in the early days, because Autonomy was one of the first U.S.-based companies to go to Singapore to test in monsoon rain testing. The Autonomy raised outside capital from corporate, and Walt, you can give the legal language on that, or the Walt language, where they took money from, which eventually became Aptiv, and then Aptiv ended up doing a JV deal with Hyundai. So you had an Aptiv Hyundai joint venture deal, which became Motional, and then you had a restructuring recently where Aptiv sold out, and I don't know the exact percentages, so I don't want to speak publicly because I do not know, even though it was filed with the SEC. And then lo and behold, it's majority owned by Hyundai today.
So a very complex pass. Thank you for that. Wasn't expecting all that detail. But Motional is basically just Hyundai, right? I mean, this is Hyundai's autonomous venture, and these are Hyundais that you were in. And meanwhile, we know that Hyundai is also going to be a partner for Waymo and AV Ride, AV Ride, however you want to pronounce it, for those cars as well. So they're both a full tech stack provider via Motional, as well as providing the cars for these other players.
Yeah, and the cars were Hyundai Ioniq 5s. And this is very important to clarify, because you talk a lot about this, sir, and you're 100% right. These were factory-built cars. They were not upfitted. These were factory-built cars specifically for Motional to deploy on the Uber Robotaxi network. And to the team at Motional, thanks for the transparency, and thank you for inviting me in the depot, showing me the teardown, showing me the factory build cars, and thank you for allowing me the experience to ride in them. Well, I got to say, I walked away impressed with the quality of product that Hyundai made.
I'm impressed by their strategy where they're willing to partner with the leader, the global leader in Waymo. They're willing to partner with AV Ride as a challenger. And they're doing this on their own, right? That is, I think, the way to be potentially a successful OEM in this space. While others, Ford, Rivian, whatever, they want to only do it internally and excluding, I think, the opportunity to partner with others. We'll see. Maybe that's the wrong strategy, but to me, making your bets these 2 different ways, 3 different, maybe 4, maybe 5, we'll see. In this future is going to be important. Let's get back to your ride though. What was your hit ratio? I don't know how much time you had to do this. I know you were there for other reasons. What was your hit ratio in Uber in getting assigned one of these Hyundais? Let's just call it a Hyundai rather than emotional. Emotional. What was your hit rate, and what was your typical wait time for those?
My first 2 rides, hit time was 100%. Wait time, I think on average was 4 minutes, maybe 5 on the high side. Very, very quick wait time. And the ride was smooth. There's something about the Ioniq 5. It's a great vehicle for robotaxis. I clearly see why Waymo chose it. And the Hyundai vehicle performed very, very well. And Walt, there is an interesting common edge case that I learned about with robotaxis in Las Vegas. Nuro told me the same thing. Motional told me the same thing. And I'm under the assumption, because Zoox won't tell me, but there is a common edge case that they all face in Las Vegas. Do you know what that is?
What's that?
Taxi cab drivers. Where there are certain taxi cab drivers that are trying to sabotage the autonomous vehicles by driving into them. And yes, if you want to give pushback, several AV companies showed me multiple video footage of the situation, and I experienced it firsthand. It is a very big problem, and I spoke to Uber drivers as well, traditional human drivers, and it is a problem as well. Interesting edge case.
Not really an edge case. Uber had this situation. I mean, it's an edge case, obviously, for autonomy. Uber faced the same challenges when they were building out on a global basis. They had some, I'm sure, crazy stories that I'm aware of from what was going on in Latin America, which was more than just, cutting in front of the car. But again, let's get back to Motional. Was this? Can anyone get this in the Uber app? Did you get a special, opportunity on this? Tell us more about the availability of these cars. How many did you see them? Around the strip a lot. A little bit more detail here, please.
Sure. From a ride perspective, any individual inside of the Uber app that opts in to get paired with robotaxis has the ability to ride in the Motional robotaxi. Motional told me, and we'll say this here for the record, that they currently have 100 vehicles in the Las Vegas market. So putting that number out there. I can also clarify and confirm, because Motional also told me this, that Motional is doing driver out testing in the Las Vegas market, and they'll be transitioning to driver out, no supervised, fully commercial operations by the end of the year. How many vehicles are actually in the Uber fleet versus the test fleet? That number was not disclosed to me, but there are currently 100 vehicles in the market.
Did you see when we go to Austin or wherever, Houston, you see Waymo, Dallas, you see Waymos everywhere. Did you see a bunch of these Hyundais everywhere?
Well, that's a great question. Certain times of the day, yes, you see more than others. And there are certain times of the day you see zero. So based on that data, I am under the assumption, this is purely an assumption, that they're only operating certain times of the day on the Uber network. I don't know if that's by Motional choice, but that's by Uber choice. I don't know, and I did see more vehicles in certain locations than I did see in other locations, which makes me believe that there are preferred pickup spots and drop-off spots.
Got it. So one last question. So basically Motional's a couple hours a day maybe, but hopefully as things broaden out, they'll expand it. I'm not sure why you'd only run it a couple hours a day. Why not just run it all day? Just a quick. Obviously they're not at scale yet because you still have someone in the driver's seat. But as you pointed out, great info. Hopefully to get driver out before year end, which is I think key metrics that we're going to be looking for Uber. But before we move on to Uber, just one last question. What was the safety driver like in these situations? You and I both have had a variety of experiences from the Tesla guys that are kind of locked down to let's just say other varied experiences with some of the other rides that we've had. How was it? How was it with the Hyundai guys?
Very professional. Thank you. Please know this is an autonomous vehicle. I will be a safety attendant. I will not be touching the wheel. I cannot speak to you. If you ask me, I cannot speak to you. Please enjoy your ride. And then away it went. And then when we got there, thank you. I hope you enjoyed your ride. Very professional, very courteous.
Right. So more towards like the Tesla model as opposed to others. I'm not going to, call them out now, where you could ask them about like what some of the interventions were like, and they're probably too chatty than they should be for being on a launch market. But all right, that's good. That's great info, by the way, on Motional. Thank you.
So it's very interesting you say that different markets, and I will say this to the audience. Versus other Hyundai Ioniq 5s, the compute and the design of the components of the vehicles are completely different. I'm going to tease that because you will see something coming there, completely different.
All right, I think I'm going to have to get out to Vegas and see this for myself. Let's move on to Uber, who is the partner of Motional. They put up earnings. Stock did well for the day. Economy, obviously, between them and DoorDash looks pretty strong, giving a lot of that back. Subsequent to that, still have this kind of overhang on the autonomy. What strikes me is this focus on 15 partners, and keep saying 15 partners on two fronts. That you still have a human there, right? So you're not really recognizing the economic benefits. By the way, it's still great. And by the way, 15 also includes Uber Eats, so that's like the delivery robots as well, like Serve or whoever. I think so. It's great, but obviously we're always looking for the next thing here on Autonomy Markets. It is Autonomy Markets. This is about making money. So what we really need to start seeing is some of those drivers coming out. Great data on Motional, that maybe this is something that's going to happen this year. Look, at the end of the day, like a great question is going to be, it's great that you have so many, like how many are going to be around in 10 years? Is there a market that can sustain 15, or let's say if it's just the cars, even 10? And also the question is like, okay, if your driver in for all these, you have to get to the economics and drive the volume so that they can take the driver out and get to the next step in terms of profitability. So it'll be useful to get to that next step. And I think that's going to become increasingly important as we see more and more cars and trucks hit the milestone of taking the driver out of there. It's obviously very small now, but our anticipation is that this industry is going through an inflection point. And you're going to see a lot more of that over the next 12 to 18 months.
From our perspective, you and I, driver out's the bar. When do investors make that the bar?
I think they already are making it the bar, given that Uber stock, ripped on great numbers and then is right back down into the mid 70s because you have this overhang on autonomy, right? And now you're not going to report for another, 90 days. And like, what are the next catalysts? They've partnered with everyone in autonomy as it is, and you probably have incremental data points coming out of Waymo and possibly Tesla as well. You got to get their partners to the point where they're launching. That's fine. When do they now take their drivers out? You're always looking for the next thing. What's interesting on the data that they gave also on the call, claiming that they have in these markets like San Francisco and LA, that where Waymo has obviously launched and is very strong for Waymo, that they claim share gains there. So I'm like, okay, what about like who are you taking them from? I don't know how they're defining the market. Maybe it's also defining taxi cabs, but I think it's clear that Waymo is at least maintaining, if not expanding, share. I think once they solve these airport issues and get more cars on the road, which now you're starting to see, some of these Chinese, cars hit the market from Waymo, that will change. But the implication is that the share is coming from Lyft. Now, Lyft reported tonight, because we're recording this a little early Thursday, and they're like, no, our share is fine in San Francisco and it's stable. So like, I don't know. There's some, conflict here in terms of data. I know there's data services that are out there that report stuff. Some of them, we've proven here on Autonomy Markets maybe to be a bit misleading. So I don't know what's going on with these share claims. But we'll just have to see, as Waymo continues to ramp vehicles there and as other autonomous vehicles ramp in the market, how that looks. I think sometimes you get data and then kind of after the fact, there's like more data that clarifies it. For example, like in the past, Uber has said, okay, drivers are doing better in Austin. They're making more money even after we've launched Uber. But the reality is, why did that happen? Because when autonomy comes to a market, they pull back. And this is Dara's, the CEO, was talking about this on the Decoder podcast. They slow down the hiring and the supply. So if you reduce supply, that obviously lifts earnings for the drivers in those markets. So, there's always, I think, ways to present data in a market that we just have to keep monitoring, and we'll see, how Waymo and as other autonomous vehicles launch in these markets, how that impacts share. And just at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is your overall revenue growth. Frankly, if they lost share and the market got so big, who cares, right? If they're growing faster than people expected.
Did we get any comments or any color from Dara as it relates to Waymo on the earnings call?
It was asked, but I think it was, they are a very good partner. They're one of the 15, and I don't think there was anything really more than that. So I think they're deftly handling that question. I think it might have been brought up on the Decoder podcast, but I think it is what it is. Obviously no one asked about the CTO's tweet, which we talked about last week. So whatever, that I think that is, in terms of investors, I don't think there's many investors believing that Waymo and Uber are going to have this great relationship. So I think that's largely discounted in the narrative that exists at Uber. So frankly, the only thing that could happen now is if they added markets and that somehow was repaired, that would be an incremental positive. So I think that topic is kind of done now. When you have people finally commenting on it on blogs about noticing this CTO, something that we've talked about for, I think, over a year now, everyone is familiar with the challenges that exist between the Uber and Waymo relationship. But let's shift to one of the partners that we have a lot of optimism for, which is Nuro. Nuro, of course, is partnered with Lucid. Look, they have their technology, which is a very inexpensive sensor stack, with the tech that they're doing. They can work with many cars. Lucid is this initial partner. I think it just got some approvals in California, which is great. But the company, Lucid is an EV company, right? And EV companies are struggling. There's not subsidies. They're still not, despite gas, at whatever, $5 a gallon, probably higher in California, people still aren't buying EVs. So, Lucid is struggling, I think, as a company. Hopefully this Nuro relationship and the purchase of cars by Uber can help them. I think it's a good looking car. It's a quality car, but it's something like autonomy. And I think this, going back to Hyundai and the right strategy, I think this is going to be the answer for a lot of these car makers. Like, you have to embrace autonomy, as your next leg of growth. I think this mix of cars sold, even though EV was not fast, but to have it, autonomy and selling into robo fleets, and then maybe at a minimum advanced ADAS, if this starts to catch on more, is a solution for them. But it is a little, problematic, I think. If you're Nuro and Uber and you're having to deal with, you'd rather have that partner doing quite well in their business so that they can crank out cars and continue to be a quality partner for them.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Outside of the financials, that's your world. I do want to say, from an engineering perspective, Lucid cars are incredibly well engineered. They just don't sell, and I think, and this is my humble opinion, I think that the Nuro Lucid car will be a great product, but I have concerns around the scaling. And you say, why do you have concerns? Because if you look at the SEC filings, you see all the parts coming out of Riyadh. We see the issues that are going on in Iran right now. So have long-term concerns about Lucid from a financial perspective, but the product is extremely, extremely well engineered.
I don't have problems. I don't have concerns about them scaling because they didn't. The demand wasn't there. That was the issue for the regular cars. So now at least Uber is creating demand. Uber and Nuro both are creating demand for these cars. So, and they also they got some approvals. I think they were granted a driverless permit from the California DMV. They're going to begin the driverless testing later this year. So, there's progress there, but, you want a healthy competitor. And by the way, Uber is the guy that backstops. Backstops all this. This gets back to the FT article, the 10 billion plus, and And Dara keeps getting asked this, like, how much money are you going to spend? And he goes back to again, the ability to offlay and finance. Again, you go to this Decoder podcast, and I think one of the things that was, or maybe it was in the earnings call actually, the issue that they have, in terms of being able to offload this to a finance partner is the finance people don't know what the residual value is on these vehicles. Like, bottom line is, like, you put 100,000 miles or whatever it's going to be on these cars, like, who's buying it? Like, is it getting sold for parts? Is someone going to buy something with a bunch of sensors on it and then just drive it like a regular car? Like with Tesla, the residual value is known. Like, it doesn't matter if it's going to be a robotaxi or not, but like, what is a Lucid with a sensor stack, if they even keep it on there, worth in that market? And I think all that does, because Uber's got plenty of cash, is push out that opportunity. Uber becomes, they're just going to use a lot more of that free cash flow to be buying cars and supporting some of these tech companies. And I think as some of these companies succeed, whether it's Lucid and Nuro or Motional and Hyundai, what you'll see is that they're going to put those dollars to buying those cars, more dollars to buying those cars, and then maybe less dollars in terms of the investment of all of these different autonomous companies. And we won't be talking about, hey, we think there's going to be 13 different autonomy companies. It's going to kind of, consolidate down to a couple of winners that I think Uber's really going to back. Could be wrong, but I mean, that seems like the more logical way that things will play out here.
It's going to consolidate in the way that it's looking now. Let's just call a spade a spade. And if you look at all the press releases and public statements from Dara, it seems that Uber is bear hugging Lucid and Nuro, and the Nuro product, as you said, they recently got their California driverless testing permit. Nuro was very kind to host me at their test track in Vegas, and I got to say, what I saw out at the test track and met with that management team out there, I was really impressed. We've been bullish on Nuro for a while now, and it's just going to be a question of the integration, because the Lucid Nuro vehicle is very, very well designed. It says, can they get enough vehicles in the market to compete? That's going to be the question. And the other question that I have is, will Uber make this a premium product, or will they put it on X? And that's something else to watch as they scale.
Grayson, we can't get through this podcast without you having been somewhere. So let me get this straight. You were taking Zoox rides. You went to see the people at Motional. You took some Motional rides. You also went out to the Nuro test track. This was a hell of a trip. Were you there all week, and what else were you doing in Vegas?
I was there, I think, roughly 36 hours. When Autonomy Markets goes on the road, we pack things in. And yes, I was there doing field work. And while I was there, I hosted a conversation between ABB Energy and Waymo. And so it goes back to the below the line. So moderated the conversation, did field work, had a time to get a little bite to eat, and then headed back to the airport.
Wasn't there some trucking stuff going on in Vegas at the same time? And if so, was there any chatter about where Waymo's trucking, autonomous trucking business is? I think it's kind of put on ice for a while, but any discussion on that?
So I did pop into the ACT Expo. That's where I moderated the panel, and a shout out to David Moss. Thanks for coming to see me moderate the panel. And I had to go up there and say hello. So David, thanks for coming by there. Yes, it was common chatter amongst the trucking executives that I spoke with and met there. And Grayson, do you think Waymo's coming back? Do you think Waymo's coming back? And I said, I'm uncertain, but then I kept putting back to the X post where Waymo put up a picture of a truck. From the conversations I had on the ACT floor, it became very apparent that autonomous trucking is getting ready to scale. And you might say, why? The trucks that were displayed on the floor, including the Tesla Semi, they were commercial grade, they were factory built. And Walt, some of them looked pretty darn cool, and then others were still in prototype. But there were, on the floor, there were some pretty well-designed vehicles that were getting ready to go there. Torque, for example, Peter von Schmidt, he displayed the Cascadia off the production line. It looked pretty good.
I mean, this might be a conference I need to go to next year. I definitely have a little. Is it fear of missing out? I've already missed out, so anger about missing out. Because, I mean, it felt like an inflection week in terms of autonomy and trucking. You had Aurora and Kodiak like cranking out the press release in terms of of new customers, and they both actually reported earnings, so we got more data and more support in terms of them, being on track for the milestones that both of them have set out. In Aurora's case, you had some validation on this concept of being capex light. This Hirschbeck deal, I think, is ultimately going to be them, Hirschbeck, I think, buying the trucks directly, and then Aurora is just getting paid effectively for the Aurora driver, and the sensors are effectively embedded into that Aurora driver stuff. And you have Kodiak talking about new OEMs for Atlas and big opportunities, in the military, given some new legislation or some new funding that's out there, to get autonomy. So it just seemed like, kind of a really good week for trucking, but maybe this was all just pumped up because of this conference that I missed and will be going to next year.
Well, all the trucking executives are there. Then we cannot forget Stack AV unveiled their pack car truck that was there on the floor. So yeah, a lot of big things happened.
Yeah, but PACCAR is also going to be, the truck that's getting used in another one of these Aurora announcements from that, the Berkshire company that I've always forget the name of the truck company, but I'm not sure they always use PACCAR, but in this case, there'll be an Aurora driver. Okay, since it's PACCAR, they obviously won't be able to take that driver out, but another example. By the way, the other thing that seems interesting to me, with the PACCAR and the Stack AV and Kodiak and some of their variety of OEMs, and what Aurora is talking about, it just seems like these trucking OEMs are maybe more willing to have multiple relationships. Puts Daimler in a different category for sure, but these other ones seem like they're willing to have multiple relationships. Frankly, even with Daimler, I think on their earnings call, there was some reference of like they're going to fund, torque, but they're always open to look to to how to enter this market. I think there was some commentaries around that, but it just seems to me like maybe these OEMs on the truck side are still keeping their options open for the different trucking technology partners that are out there.
They're still keeping their options open, and just today, a matter of fact, Aurora posted a picture on X showing the international truck, and I'm going to summarize this here very simply, coming soon. So yeah, there's the OEMs and trucking are getting smart and saying, okay, they're pulling a Hyundai. Okay, we want to work with multiple partners, and I think working with multiple partners is the right approach.
It's also happening at a time where you have this governor race. Let's back up. We're in the election season, so you have a lot of politicians that are going to be talking about protecting jobs and being against it. I mean, this trucking, I think you just have to look through that noise. California, in Kodiak's case, I think is going to get approval for operating in California. We'll see if the governors can theoretically stop that. You have the Southeast where these guys can operate and build. And I think it's going to work the same way it's going to work with cars. Like there'll be cities and states that try and prevent them, and they'll be successful in the near term, but they'll see the, how it helps in terms of safety and in terms of, building the economy in these markets, that I think these things will find their way. But obviously there's still some regulatory work to be done on these things.
Well, there's still regulatory work. This is my belief that the public acceptance for both vehicles and trucking are shifting away from the naysayers to the possibles. How do we do this? How do we make this possible? What do we have to do? Who do we have to vote for? Because when California DMV put out the regulations paving the way for autonomous trucks weighing over 10,001 gross pounds to deploy in the state of California, two leading candidates for governor said first thing they do in office is overturn that. And I know why that is, and you know why that is. One word: politics. It's not about safety. It's about politics. And I believe that the American public is seeing right through the shenanigans.
Yeah, they will. And again, like I said, there'll be states where it won't be allowed, then there will be allowed. Just one last thing on Aurora. Again, loved your video, or actually looking forward to your video of, your ride in the bot auto truck with the driver out. But Grayson, you better get that thing out quick, because I think Aurora is going to be fully driver out. I know they like to say driverless with these PACCARs, but literally no one in the cab, at some time this quarter. I think it's going to happen this quarter. We've only got 60 days left. So you better get your video out first before Aurora jumps the gun and releases that.
So I have very good news for you. The video has been edited. It is queued up. It is going live Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. It's going live. So there it is.
And by the way, and congrats again to Bot Auto. But look, if Aurora gets this out, I don't know, they've got a decent flair for publicity and press releases. That's going to be another big milestone. Again, think about all of these auto companies, right, that still have the AV ride, whatever it is, still have a driver in there. We're talking about a company with a massive 18-wheeler that's going to be on American roads without a driver in there and running, paying routes. Looking forward to that event. I'm feeling pretty good that Aurora is going to be able to hit that milestone this quarter.
What I want to see more than anything, I want to see multiple autonomous trucking companies running drive route on multiple lanes on the same lanes. That's what I want to see. This is not a race about who can do it first. Bot did it. I want Aurora to succeed in it. I want Kodiak to succeed in it. We want Volvo Autonomous Solutions to succeed in it. We want Stack, if they can ever figure out their PACCAR relationship, to succeed. Wabi, if they decide to stay in trucking, we want them to succeed. We want everybody to succeed and operate drive route. That's the bottom line.
I hear you, but first does matter. Like, these are companies that are still burning a lot of cash, right? And, you know, we just, obviously when Kodiak reported, they did a pipe. It was obviously priced under where the stock is trading at. If you're not first and another company gets momentum, it becomes harder, obviously, to raise capital. So I get you that first is not necessarily the winner, but it's an important part when you have companies that, you know, aren't Zoox. They don't have Amazon's backing. They're not Waymo. You don't have Google's backing. These guys are, you know, are out there having to continue to fund losses. Companies that are, you know, some are a little bit more efficient than others, but it's definitely important to get not only revenue on the tape, but to show people that you can ride trucks without anyone in the seat. Like, the economics of, like, it's fine to have revenue and be a carrier, but you need to show the economics of the fact that the whole point of this is to not have the human in there for both safety reasons, but also, you know, to drive profitability. So I think that being first or being early and scaling that up is important. Then you're right. Like, once you're there, you got that milestone. Then you go to the next thing. We're always looking at the next thing. Like, congrats again, going back to Uber. Congrats for having 13, you know, theoretically autonomous launches. But, like, okay, what's next? That's the way it works. What's next? When do those drivers come out? And you know, as we kind of, it's already May. We're going to start thinking about what's next for 27. Those are going to be the new benchmarks that you're going to be measured by. And that's why this industry is so great, right? That's why we're at that inflection point. If we were still talking about number of people that launched with a safety driver, we wouldn't be talking about an industry that's about to inflect, and that autonomy is upon us now. That's what's so great about this industry, that we can continue to move these hurdles that these companies have to achieve in order to be the leaders in this space. It's going to be an exciting year, man.
It's going to be very exciting. And you want to know what's next for us? I'm releasing a field report on May 17th with Kodiak from the Permian Basin. I went there and saw drive route commercial operations in the Permian. That video's coming because we're ramping up field reports here. There's a lot more coming.
It's almost getting irritating now how many field reports you're talking about between this Vegas trip and the Permian Basin and Houston. I mean, it's just dunking left and right. All right, what do we have for next week?
I have to give a shout out to somebody. There was I see an individual, a very nice individual. First thing out of his mouth, "Hi Grayson, where's Walter?" He calls you Walter. Where's Walter? I said, "What am I, chopped liver? Where's Walter?" Peter Von Schmidt, thank you for that wonderful comment. So here's Walter. He's on the podcast. That came from the CEO of Torque. First thing you want to know, where's Walter?
And by the way, and to all the companies that are listening, we can never have enough field trips. So we've been calling for this every week. You've been fulfilling it probably a little bit more than I have. I'm doing my best to keep up with your pace, but I got some space and earnings and telcos to deal with at the same time. But give us the location, the date, and we will be there to try your product, to check out your infrastructure. Love it. And I think this is the best way to try and, keep up to date with how this industry's expanding.
And don't worry, at some point we're going to get in a Magic Autonomy school bus and we're going to come there on the Magic Autonomy bus. That's right. Before we get the bus, that's coming in the future, because I never got off the bus. What do we need to look for next week in the autonomy markets?
I'm hoping to get some more information out of WeRide next week. I think they've got a call that they'll talk. They'll give us an update. An important company for Uber, an important company for autonomy, and one of the few globally that is operating with that no driver in that driver's seat.
Driver out is the benchmark. It's the benchmark that we watch. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is field reports. Walt, until next week.